What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the inevitable follow-up to yesterday's video about games you should not 100% with some games you should 100%. Obviously, to get it out of the way right at the beginning, I am well aware that for most people, just finishing a game is a monumental task, let alone doing everything else there is to do, so it probably bears a mention that realistically, you should play games in whatever way is the most fun for you. But as somebody who does 100% a lot of games, I can both acknowledge that 99% of the time that doesn't do much for most people, but also that sometimes there are a few games here and there where the process of actually doing everything that a game has to offer adds something to the experience. Or in other more simple cases, sometimes it's just a lot of fun. So that's kind of the point of this particular video. And to that end, let's go ahead and dive into the rest of this thing. So kicking it off with, I would say probably the easiest of these to make, is of course Baldur's Gate 3, a game that has received a pretty unprecedented amount of praise for a CRPG since it launched. In fact, I made so much money covering that game that it wound up paying off my house. So I think convincing people to play and enjoy this one is obviously pretty easy and safe thing to do. But what I'm talking about here is actually specifically 100%ing this game, because one thing I really enjoyed about it in my time with it, over a process that took me a couple months, mind you, because I had to play some other games in the meantime, and then I threw up a launch review. I was actually one of the first people outside of Larian themselves to beat this game. But in all of that time with it, the thing that stood out to me the most is how even after you get all the achievements, which are really only part of the 100% here, you can keep doing playthroughs and finding new things. My favorite example of this personally is how, honestly, I don't like the character of Astarion that much. But if you're willing to put that aside and play through the game as Astarion via his origin, I think getting that more first-hand perspective on all the choices that are involved in his story over the game is a much more impactful experience than simply having him in your party, which is something I really enjoyed. It showed me a different angle on somebody I didn't like up to that point. And that's something that could happen continuously with different characters and moments throughout this entire game, which is what led me to over a dozen full playthroughs of it, and that's before patch 8 actually drops, bringing 12 new subclasses to try out. Ultimately, though, this game is full of moments like that, and there are simply too many of them to list out here, but I think you kind of get the gist about why that is such a great experience, which I'm sure, to be fair, is why many people have already done so long prior to this video. So on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, then, let's go with something much more interesting, and that is Betrayal at Club Low, which is a tiny, bizarre game you've likely never heard of if you don't watch the channel regularly, I suppose. I've mentioned it a few times here and there. Now, this game is like my hear me out of video games. Yes, this game looks bad. I will be the first person to tell you that. But it's also really good. So it is a bizarre sort of one-shot adventure where you play as a member of some agency trying to get back one of your operatives who has gotten into some trouble at the local club. We're going to pose as a pizza delivery man and try to get him out. And this is going to lead you through a bunch of bizarre scenarios where you put together things like pizza dice in order to roll success chance on all the things you do that ultimately leads to a whole host of different endings. This game is pretty short. You could 100% it realistically in the span of like a day, maybe 6 to 8 hours. But what I think is really interesting about it, and why I wanted to put it just after BG3, is that this game actually shares a lot of the same sort of design philosophies, where the game is incredibly reactive to the things you do and the things your character is capable of, except distilled down to a much more friendly amount of time, let's say. And because of all that, if you're willing to get past how this game looks, I think you'll find a delightfully unique experience that you probably won't ever forget, which is why I think people should 100% it. And hey, there's even a demo on Steam if you'd prefer to try it out first. Third up on our list, however, we then have Another Crab's Treasure, a game I have spoken about many times, truth be told, all for much the same reason. This is a sort of comedy Souls-like about being a hermit crab trying to find his shell that has a remarkably good story, but also takes the actual Souls-like elements very seriously. If you want to approach this game as a full-blown Souls-like, you can absolutely do that. But if you struggle with that kind of thing, you can instead give your character here a gun and one-shot all of the bosses, meaning that 100% on this game is really just as difficult as you choose to make it, and that's to say nothing about how fun everything else about this game is, like the exploration or the little puzzles here and there and that kind of thing. Ultimately though, there's a lot of reasons to love this game. I had a blast getting 100% on it, and I will not stop talking about it until I get more and more people to play it. Though, to keep it moving, that does bring us to number 4, and this is High on Life, actually, another sort of comedy game that you don't exactly see get a lot of marketing, but truth be told, I really enjoy games like this, and that is because I kind of enjoy that style of humor. I have mentioned this on the channel before, but I've actually 100% both of the South Park games from Obsidian, because they are simultaneously pretty good RPGs, but also really, really funny. So when I saw High on Life was set to release and was incredibly irreverent, let's say, to keep it polite, I knew I wanted to check it out. And basically, if you don't mind that style of humor, it's a fantastic experience, with a lot of little silly moments here and there that really kind of take, I would say, traditional gamer stereotypes or, just anything kind of in that vein and flips them around or does something fun with them. Now, I'll be the first person to tell you, though, this game is its humor. If you don't enjoy the humor, it really doesn't have much else to offer you other than a, pretty by-the-book shooter that really isn't anything to write home about in that department. But I also wanted to include this one on the list purely because this is one of 2 videos of mine that YouTube has ever demonetized. And I'm going to make my money off this footage one way or another. So that does bring us to our last entry, and it is a game that I saved for last for a very specific reason, and that is Indika. A mostly, I would say, narrative experience with some puzzle-solving elements, that type of stuff, but Indika takes you on the journey of a mentally unwell nun who is hearing voices and having trouble with religion in a sort of alternative history Russia. It's not a terribly long game. 100% on this might take you like 5-6 hours, but the reasons I wanted to put it here are twofold. One, it's a very unique story that I thought was really well done. The ending is very open to interpretation about what you think this means. I think they did fun stuff with the game mechanics in terms of everything that's going on. But the other, I would say more primary reason, is the sort of meta commentary that's going on the side of it, and that is that when playing this game, you'll often see Indika here doing things like collecting points and whatnot at the behest of these voices in her head, and it's clear this is stuff she's just imagining, and the game will even tell you that there's 0 points to any of it. And then you get to the end of the game and it doesn't matter, and you're left with the here and now and having to decide about what to do now, both as you the player but also for Indika. But what I love about the 100% on this game in particular is that if you're getting the achievements along the way, you get a sort of extra layer to that, because a lot of the achievements aren't like anything interesting. There's stuff like throwing yourself off the docks into water several times, or little things like that, just little go here, do this thing type of stuff. And in the context of this video game, it's a wonderful little addition to the story, because you're jumping through all these hoops for our imaginary little points that matter in relation to this game about as much as the actual points she is collecting throughout the game. And much like many games, when you're done collecting all of your imaginary stuff and you finally set that game down with a story that potentially resonates with you, you might sit there and find yourself asking what it is you're going to do next, and did any of that really even matter to begin with? And the only meaning that's going to be attributed to both that concept as well as the answers that you decide on, and I think that's beautiful in its own weird way, which is why you should 100% that one. But that is pretty much going to wrap up this particular video. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.